All right, welcome back to yet another episode of this lovely Blasters and Blades podcast. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. Well, normally that's Doc's job, but she is in the middle of moving, which I don't envy because I hated moving. It's a lot to pack and not break stuff. That's always a pain. And Garber is back on whatever the Border Patrol has him doing. So I don't know, probably playing tiddlywinks. So it's just me today and our lovely ladies as guests. So we're going to mix things up with another book review. And if you've listened to the interview of Katie Cross and Derek Sitaway, you know that I was a super fan of that novel, Spring for Spears. So we're going to talk about it. But first, I'm going to let our guests, we're going to start with you, Karen. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
I'm Karen. I live in Wisconsin on the shores of Lake Superior.
So do you like to fish then if you're on the shores of the beach?
Yeah, but we don't fish the big lake much. We just do inland.
Okay. So do you like long walks on the beach then? You almost have to do that because you live by a beach.
Yeah, but with the water coming up, there's not much beach left where there was beach 20 years ago. So there's less walking on the beach now.
So I live in Newport News, so it's close enough to the beach that I get told I'm supposed to like long walks on the beach, but beaches have tourists, and tourists are annoying, so I avoid it. 0 stars.
It's rough on the legs if you're not used to it.
This is true, and the sand gets really hot.
Yeah.
So, all righty. And what about you, Carrie? Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Hey, everybody. I'm Carrie. I live in Virginia. I have been a long-time sci-fi fantasy fan, so I'm excited about this. And thanks for having me.
All right. And so now we're going to tell you, dear listeners, dear viewers, how we found them. So I wanted to do a book review because as you heard in our interview with Katie that I love the book. If you read my review, which I will link to again in the show notes. So we decided we had to do a review of it because I read it. So why not? And so I reached out to Katie to Shanghai her readers because they were so loyal into coming on the show. So I had guests. And here we are. But before we get started, ladies, we have to do the religion question because it is a requirement for this podcast. So are you ready?
Ready.
All right. We're going to start with you, Karen. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Wars.
Okay. What is it about Star Wars that you love?
It's the one that I've watched the most. My daughter is in love with Firefly and has all of the seasons, but I haven't gotten around to watching it yet. She thinks Nathan Fillion is the boss, and
Fillion is an interesting guy. I watched him in Castle as well, which was kind of funny because he played a writer in that show, and the show was so popular that they hired a ghostwriter to write books as the fictional character from the show that Nathan Fillion played.
Yeah,
so there's a ghostwriter for a fake author.
And
weird world we live.
Now he's in a new movie.
Oh, really? Oh, I have to check that out. I'm not up on all the movies, so I kind of wait till they get to Netflix. So, all right. And then what about you, Miss Carrie? Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Well, just because of my age, I was introduced to Star Wars, as a child growing up, and Star Trek had been on the TV probably, from the day I was born. So, but honestly, all three, I guess of the three, I'm more of a Trekkie.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not up on all the new stuff going on in Star Wars. So don't ask me any modern questions.
So Star Wars was a lovely trilogy. It was amazing. I wish they'd do more. I know they did some Pretenders to the Throne, but
yeah,
I'm a trilogy supremacist for Star Wars. But all jokes aside, I liked some of the newer content as well. So Star Trek, did you which one was your favorite Enterprise? Was it with Captain Kirk, Picard?
Picard.
Yeah. So the Next Generation?
Yeah. But I watched them all. So
I did love the holodeck. It'd be a lot of fun to have one of those in real life.
Yeah. I would like that.
That could be a lot of fun.
It's fun watching the Captain Kirk ones now and seeing how cheesy they look.
Yeah, and
as the kids say.
Yeah, it's Cringe Factory, but in a good way.
Yeah.
But you have to remember the ground they were breaking as they made them,
Oh,
which
yeah.
kind of gives it it just some of the campy moments that it led to, like with the uniforms. They wanted to prove they weren't sexist, so in the first season of the Next Generation, they actually had some of the guys wearing those mini skirts.
Well, and so many of the things that they introduced are for real now. So
there are X Prize contestants, which is a prize that the government sponsors. It's a contest to try to create the new next big thing in tech, where the guy invented essentially WebMD on a handheld device, and for the tricorder to try to make it functional, to be able to test for certain things. I mean, it's limited in versatility at the moment, but it's still amazing how much they predicted, like
That
the
is-
flat screen TVs and the handheld phones. And
I was watching Shatner yesterday because I was watching The Unexplained again, and the new season's going to be coming out soon. So I just like listening to his voice. And
So did you know Shatner's going to be on a new reality TV show that he's hosting?
I don't think I did.
So it's celebrity stars on Mars, and basically they're going to be living out in the desert in a faux Mars habitat to see if you can survive. And it's like Last Man Standing, voted off the island, all that stuff, but in a Mars kind of vibe. Fox Entertainment's putting it on, which I'm kind of like, it looks amazing. Shatner's going to be on there as the host, but then again, Fox Entertainment's where all the good shows go to die. So I'm afraid they're going to mess it up. Because there's potential here. Like, they're testing out some of the new technology, seeing how people deal with the stress, the isolation, all of that. So I don't know. It looks amazing, but I'm afraid they might mess it up.
We'll have to see.
I just saw the commercial for it, so we'll have to I have to see what happens. I don't think it comes out till July, so this episode will be out. It should be before that show is out, so we can all check it out. Maybe we'll do a review of that next.
All right.
And because we're polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades, Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter? What about you, Carrie?
Oh, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. I'm not a Game of Thrones person.
Okay. If you had to choose between Potter and Lord of the Rings, which one would you pick?
Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
But
what about you, Karen?
I love Harry Potter, so.
Okay. What about you, Karen?
Well, my first introduction to this was the Wheel of Time, and then the Sword of Shannara and Sword of Truth series about.
Ooh, good stuff. I loved all of those.
Ago, which I inhaled all of the books as fast as I could, and I've worked on rereading them. More recently, it would be Potterverse.
Did you watch any of the Sword of the Truth, the Seeker series that was on the television for, I think, 2 seasons?
Yeah.
It was, I don't know. I had mixed feelings about it. I thought they could have done more, but it was good for what it was. But then again, like, because I liked it, it only got like 2 seasons.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where they keep the shows that I'm like, whatever, going for like decades. But then the stuff you really like, they're like, I get 1 season and you all like it. So
I never watched Game of Thrones, so.
I don't really like Grimdark, so I never did. As a general rule, if the TV series came first, I'll watch that before I read the books on it, or vice versa. But then I can't in good conscience start a book series I know they'll never end, because I'll just irk myself.
Right.
So I'll get around to it when George R.R. Martin gets around to finishing the series.
Sounds like a
One
plan.
of these days. One of these days. I don't know what's going to happen first. Elon Musk opening the Motel 6 on Mars, or George R.R. Martin finishing his series. My money's on Musk. So, all right, dear listeners, now let's we'll get into the actual book review. So before we get started, we're going to break up the section and define our terms. So first, we're going to talk about the summary, which is where we give a synopsis of the book, sometimes even straight from the back of the book. Then we're going to look at the book cover, look at the font, the image, the typesetting, the coloring. Does it sell us the book? We'll talk about the main characters. We'll talk about the plot. Is his general idea of the story arc? Was it action-packed, easy to follow, etc.? We'll talk about the world building and the description. How fleshed out was their world? Did I buy it? Could we envision ourselves there? Basically, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll talk about the narration, if applicable. And so, ladies, if you guys read and didn't listen, you can sit that part out. Then we'll talk about any major themes and then go overall what we thought of the book. So let me pull up because I thought I had it and I did not, the book review, the book blurb. So I'm going to read you the blurb from the back of the book. Wow, speak much today, JR. The fate of the wolf falls. A wolf rider falls on an outcast. Astrid would give anything to be one of the Ulfsark, fearless warriors who ride giant Amarak wolves. Like her ancestors, she yearns for the soul-deep bond with a wolf, the connection, the union, a chance to prove her worth and honor her mother's legacy. Yet she never heard the wolf song, and with each passing year, it's likely she never will. Astrid refuses to accept her fate. Then an encounter with a nature spirit and a foreign princess dashes her last hope and changes everything. Accused of killing a royal guardsman, Astrid travels to the halls of the Mad King to clear her name and stop a war against her people. Though she has no Amarak wolf, Astrid refuses to fail her tribe, even if she cannot be an Ulfsark. There she'll discover a regular wolf that opens her heart, friends she never asked for in a new world far more dangerous and strange than anything she ever imagined. So with that description summary, did that sell you on the book? Would that make you buy it if you weren't already a fan of Katie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. And it's exciting because it is the first book set in this world. So
it's always fun finding a new world to go into.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't ask, but both of you came through Katie, or were either one of you Derek Sidaway fans before you found the series?
Katie.
Okay. I thought so, but I just want to make sure. So you liked that as a description or summary of the book?
Yeah.
I would say go ahead.
It's got a good hook. That's what I look for in a book, and then I read the first chapter or two, and if it doesn't get to me, then I put the book down and go to a different one. So
yep.
I didn't put this one down till I was done.
I didn't. I listened to it, but I listened straight through. I will say that this book description is a little longer. Katie's normally a lot more succinct with her book descriptions.
Yeah.
It's definitely, the less is more formula. This sort of takes the page off the movie trailer guy, in a world where, and then insert whatever.
Yeah.
So this one didn't fit that model, but I mean, I still think it sold me. So
I think it's more Derek than.
I agree.
She let Derek take the show for the most part, and
yeah, I think he wrote that.
I mean, it still made me interested. So,
mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to share the book cover, and we'll take a look at that. All right, so this is the book cover, which I like.
Yeah.
So, all right. So first off, obviously I like it. I like that it has the silhouette. It's reminiscent of the old trad pub style covers without being as boring as most of them were. My complaint against most of the traditionally published fantasy and YA book covers was they looked too much like they were trying to be modern art and not enough like they were trying to sell me the property. I did not feel that way with this one. Like I said, I liked the silhouette. What do you guys think of the cover?
Karen?
I really liked it. I mean, if I was in a bookstore and saw it on a shelf and I was looking for a book, it would be one that I picked up because of the cover and turned it over and read the back. So
yeah, it exudes power.
It's eye-catching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they say red is a. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just saying it exudes power. You can just feel the power of. You can see the warrior and the wolf, and it just it makes you want to read what's inside.
It definitely, and they say red is a power color in general. That's why in business they tell you to wear a red tie kind of thing. So I think that color scheme makes it just pop, generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Although we talked about this when we interviewed Katie and Derek about it, but if this was a true Amarak wolf, it should be a lot bigger than her, or closer to a horse size to her. But obviously that's not what we got with the image. And so, if you read the story, you'll understand why, obviously, but that would be a spoiler.
Right.
But I really liked it. I thought it worked. I liked the font, the way they did the typesetting. It's very clear that it's a standalone series from her others, but it still has the same feel of her other covers. So if you look at this and you didn't see her name on the cover, you could still say, oh, this is a Katie Cross book, which is generally a goal when you're doing them.
That's true.
So if you didn't read the blurb and you just saw this image, would it make you buy the book?
I would be intrigued to. I always do go to the blurb, of course, but I would be intrigued to find out more about what's inside. Yeah, I would.
Yeah,
it would definitely for me too. What about you, Karen?
Yeah, I would too. Like she
And this
said,
would-
I always read the blurb, so I
Right.
have a little more information. But definitely, just by looking at it, I would be interested enough to pick it up. So, just by
I
the
do
cover.
judge a book by its cover, and this one would have had me. And it works in thumbnail too. So if you look at it on Amazon or if you look at it on your Kindle, it still pops, which is really hard to do with artwork. Because that's why I think Katie does the less is more. She keeps a more simple approach. If it gets too busy, it gets hard to see when you're looking at it for an ebook, I think.
Right.
So
True.
this worked across the formats.
I also really get pulled in by the covers. So if your cover isn't appealing, I'll move on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious to see how they take this theme of the silhouette with the coloring and stuff into future books, because they're going to want all of them to have the same vibe without being the same. So I
Right.
can't wait to see what book 2's cover looks like.
I just realized, it is spring is for spears, and I was just looking at the colors and feeling like they were more not necessarily a spring color, but that doesn't matter.
No, but I get what you're saying. You would almost think it'd be like greens and browns for
Right.
spring, or
Yeah,
maybe
but
even blue for the sky.
they wanted to make you feel the power of the book, I think, and maybe a green spring color wouldn't have done that as much.
I mean, there's definitely psychology in what colors do for you. I know green is supposed to be soothing and calming color.
Right.
And if you wanted to pop, I get what you're saying. I hadn't thought of that, but it makes perfect sense. So
Yeah,
interesting.
they do go through the seasons. I believe that each book is a season. So you're right. It will be interesting to see how it progresses.
Okay.
I think the red
All right.
was cool because it shows warmth. And spring,
Yeah,
start seeing warmth again.
Right.
that makes sense too. Already the deep thinkers on this show, ladies. All right, so next we're going to talk about the characters. So the main character is Astrid, as they talked about in the blurb. So a young woman coming of age and struggling to find her identity outside of one of the few chosen Ulfsarks who get privileged to ride the Amarak wolves. So what did you think of Astrid as a main character?
I think she was very believable. The outcast, the bullied person, loses her temper, has to learn how to control her temper, is extremely sensitive that she's not hearing the wolf song, and because she's feeling the pressure of being the descendant of someone important to the tribe. So all of that is really relatable to things that happen in young kids' lives or even our lives. So in the pressures of dealing with everyday life.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. She's been through a lot. She's getting to the point where she's aging out of the program, if you will. And she's feeling a lot of things, and I really felt compelled by her character, and I felt she was really well-rounded and believable.
Yeah, I thought she was well-rounded and believable as well. I think she is, and this might come later as one of the themes, but it's a harsh reality that you have to learn as you grow up, that sometimes you can try your best at something and you'll just not be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Any little boy that ever wanted to play professional sports because they loved to play but had no skill, the musician that was tone deaf, like you have to accept at a certain point in time. Maybe I just outed myself. Anyway, you have to accept at a certain point in time that like you can do your best, and that's commendable, but you just don't have what it takes. And this is obviously not quite the same because it's not a skill based. It's just are you chosen? but she's coming to terms with, you can want something really bad. You can do all of the training to try to get there, and you still might not ever win. And you have to learn to make peace with that.
Right.
And I think that's a harsh lesson most kids have to learn as they start aging out of the education system and trying to decide what's next for them in their life.
Yeah, I see that a lot coming from the small town that I'm in.
Yeah.
They're so sheltered in this area that then they get out and go off to school somewhere and they just don't know how to handle it. So it's just so difficult for them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that, if you go like to a lot of the elite colleges, for instance, you can insert any one of them, and you think, well, I was my school's valedictorian, or insert whatever honors you got, but the whole school is full of other people just like you who were also the valedictorian and whatever. And so that's that culture shock you get when you leave a small town,
Yeah.
which is essentially what Astrid grew up in, because they're nomadic villages.
Right.
Yep.
They have to be smaller family clan units because the wolves eat so dang much.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you figure a wolf the size of a horse and what a wolf eats now, I mean, I'm imagining it eats a horse a day on size,
Yeah.
I still want one as a pet.
Okay.
Need a bigger house.
Yeah, I need a bigger house, to accommodate, and a bigger budget for the food bill.
Yeah.
So what did you think of Astrid's character development throughout the course of the first novel?
I think it was really well written. She developed her shyness or her insecurity started going away, and she started becoming someone that she thought she could be. And even though she wasn't going to get what she really wanted, but it was you could see the continual advancement in her maturity.
Yeah, that's fair. What about you, Carrie? What did you think of the character development as the novel progressed?
I think that I agree with Karen. I think that, she grew being put in all these different situations that she wasn't familiar with and that she wasn't comfortable with. And she knew in her heart what she needed to do. And did I answer the question?
Yes. So I will say, she felt like, just because her history, her parents were her mother was a famous Ulfsark rider that had passed.
Mm-hmm.
And she grew up under the shadow of her mother's legacy.
Right.
And so you watch her go from being isolated because of that, and her not hearing the wolf call, she becomes even more isolated because other people are judging her, not just for her own merits, but against her mom's perceived merits. And when people pass on and they were good at something, the stories tend to get more, and it becomes bigger. And so I imagine the legacy kind of overshadowed her and almost swallowed her. So throughout the course of the novel, as she goes away to the city of the Mad King, I want to call him George, but that's not his name.
Oscar.
But as as she gets away from that and she can sort of breathe on her own, you get to see her grow into her own person away from the legacy of her mom. Because when she goes to the new kingdom, when she sees the everything that happens, she's on her own. There is nothing to hide on. It's just her versus the world. And so, good, bad, or indifferent, she stands alone. And I think that's where you see true, just interpersonal development. So I like that.
She had to break out of her cocoon that she was in when she got there.
Absolutely.
And learn to stand on her own 2 feet.
So there were, obviously she was the main character because it was told, she was telling the story, but did you have any favorite secondary characters in the story?
I mean, I'm not sure I'm saying it right. Ewan. Okay. Ewan, right? How do you say it? Yeah. Ewan, like Ewan McGregor. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the bard.
Minstrel. Yeah.
Yes. of course, I liked him and the rest of them, the twin girls, and the other guy.
The minstrels, they were, on the one hand, they blended into the background, which makes sense if you read the novel. We don't want to give spoilers, but if you read the novel, why they blended into the background makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But they were secondary characters that were fun to sort of try to suss out what they were doing and why. So I'm definitely, because they describe them right in the beginning as heavily armed, but minstrels. And when you think bards, you don't think warriors necessarily. I mean, anybody who's played any kind of Dungeons and Dragons type trope or read fantasy along those lines, like you get this idea when you think bard of a scrawny dude with, oil slicked hair kind of thing. And they didn't fit that mold.
Right.
Which made them stick out and left you wondering why. So yeah, I liked that. What about you, Karen? Did you have a favorite secondary character?
The princess, but I can't remember her name.
Rosamund?
Yeah.
Rosalind, yeah. I liked her too. That was a twist I didn't see coming.
I didn't see that coming either.
Well, we don't want to give spoilers, but let's just say that was not what I was expecting. And I generally look for the unexpected because, I write too, so I'm used to, it's like, okay, how would I twist this? And I had lots of ideas of how that would get twisted, and it wasn't that.
It wasn't that, yeah.
Yeah, so, and anybody that reads a lot also kind of gets conditioned to look for where they're going to try to subvert expectations.
Right.
And they surprised, I think they pulled it off well, and it was believable. And then once you read it and you're like, oh, and so some of the stuff that happened before kind of starts to make more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did like the captain of her guard, of Rosalind's guard, that I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he was very believable as sort of the typical gruff soldier. I think it worked without being, too over the top, which sometimes can happen. So
a character that I would have liked to have seen more of was the spirit of winter.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to more of that type of thing in the future books.
Yeah, I've told Katie that I want her to stop writing all of her other books to give me more of these, but she said that's not happening, that she likes Bianca too much. So, I mean, not that she's not writing more people. She clearly is, but she won't stop everything else for me and write more of this one. So apparently I've been voted off the island.
Apparently. We'll vote you back on.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to pause for a moment before we start talking about the plot, because this is a good breaking point, and we're going to shamelessly shill for the man. Or actually, I take that back, for the woman this time. Thank you, Christina.
If Princess Linathena cannot stave off civil war, then a mad goddess will surely take the throne. The king of Lithonia is dying. When he is gone, Lithonia will be ruled by either a cruel sadist or a 6-year-old boy. Princess Linathena Morthon is third in line, and she has no intention of letting her country burn. She will do whatever she must to protect her people, even if that means leaving the country she loves. When the mad goddess of Hathor sets her gaze upon Lithonia's throne, the king decides to use Princess Linathena as a bargaining chip with his closest allies in Kael Danan. Now stranded in a foreign country, away from her center of political power, Linathena must use every tool at her command to scrape together allies and save her country from a fate worse than death. But will her would-be husband be one of those allies, or just another enemy? Author Christina Gould debuts with a dark, high-stakes political fantasy where every new face hides a potential threat. Pick up From the Ashes and discover the shadow games that will determine the future of several nations.
All right, thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. All right, so we were about to talk about the plot of the novel, and so this is generally an idea of the story arc. Was it action packed? Was it easy to follow? Did it lag anywhere? Were there parts that you couldn't buy, you didn't buy into, as in you didn't believe? So, what did you think overall of the plot? And either one of you ladies can jump in.
I don't think there was any lag in any of the storylines. It kept you just suspenseful enough to keep you reading and wanting to know what was going to happen to her next, or what was going to happen to her next, and how she was going to deal with what was happening to her. So I just kept turning pages.
Yeah.
I stayed up all night to read it.
What about you, Karen?
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot the question.
So, what did you think of the plot in the story arc? I said Karen, I meant Carrie. I'm sorry.
I know. The plot did just continually move forward. I felt like it was powerful. There was always things that were cropping up that you wanted to know more about. There were a lot of mysterious things that happened, and I didn't find any parts that were slow. So
Yeah, I think the pacing was really good, which is the how action packed it was. I think there were enough exciting moments to balance out the plot progression, so it didn't feel like it was dragging on, but it also gave you room to breathe between bouts of excitement.
Yeah.
I think that that's one area the two of them did really well in. It was easy to follow, partly because the writing style was a lot more conversational. Sometimes with fantasy YA, you can get what we call the purple prose, where they can try to be too poetic just for the sake of pretty words that sounded good, that can distract you from the story itself.
yeah.
And I think between Derek and, I haven't read any of Derek's work yet, but I have read Katie's. I think that's just her normal style. She sort of writes in, more common, I don't want to say common, like more Tom Clancy, simple prose style is her, which makes it easy
Everyday
to
man
read.
style.
Yeah, she just writes, she tells the story and doesn't focus on getting too pretty with her words, which I like. It makes it easy to follow. I think that kind of preference sort of comes in waves, and but I think the way she did it will be timeless, just because it might not be in vogue to write that way, but it won't be hard to understand because it was so simple in the prose. So, and there wasn't really anything I didn't buy with the plot. I think she seems to understand human nature, which makes the underlying impetus believable. Anybody who's dealt with the real world as an adult understands sometimes life is cruel and unfair, and you see that in this story. So it's not like you read it and be like, yeah, would that really happen though? I could see it happening exactly as they wrote it, with some of the injustices. So no, I think they nailed it on the plot.
Yeah, the plot was great. It went along with the growth of Astrid and learning to deal with the pressure that she had and whether or not she was going to get what she want, and moved it along. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and she didn't fall into sometimes the YA trope of making the main character so angsty you just want to punch him in the face.
right.
Some book review sites and movie review sites call these characters that were too stupid to live.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was not one of those stories. Like Astrid felt like she could be any one of your sisters, daughters, whatever. Having never been a teenage girl, I can't speak exactly, but I did have teenage sisters at one point in time, and her reactions sort of fit with the human nature as I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the two of the authors, Katie Cross and Derek Sidaway, did an amazing job. All right, so now we're going to talk about the world building and the description. So we're going to look at, was the world that they exist in fleshed out? Did it feel believable and lived in? Could you envision yourself there? The good, the bad, and the ugly. And did they give you enough details that you could picture it in your head like a movie?
I definitely felt like I could picture what they were describing, especially, at the beginning of the story when they were describing, where Astrid was living at that time and her tribe. And I felt like I could see it as I was reading it.
Okay. What about you, Karen?
I felt like I was standing there right next to her throughout the story, going through what she was going. So yeah, it was very believable, and I could imagine myself into that situation and feel her feels and fear her fears. And the descriptions were really good. You could imagine yourself in the woods with the giant wolf chasing after you. And
yeah, I think Katie did I say Katie. because she's the one I know. But I mean, I think the two of them did a good job at describing things from a sensory level. So they talked about how things smelled, how things felt. They mentioned the dew in the morning grass, which, you know, if
Yeah.
you've ever had to get up and run around, like, you know, because in the Army we did PT sometimes before the sun woke up. And so the way they described, you know, rolling around in the wet grass, I'm like, yep, been there, done that. I think, you know, they just made the nature feel lived in, which, given where Katie lives and where Derek lives, because, you know, they've both talked about it in their interview, being on a ranch or, you know, in the woods, like, it fits that they would make nature believable. It definitely didn't feel like someone living in a concrete jungle tried to explain what it might look like because they saw
Yeah.
a park once.
Right.
So, yeah, it felt real as far as the world they described. There was hints at enough of the history, especially when the winter spirit mentioned when was talking about things. So you got the impression that there was more to the world than what you were seeing, which is ideal. You know, you want the world to feel like it's lived in without, you know, the info dump of, let me tell you the entire history of Middle Earth in the first
Yeah.
5 paragraphs. Like, that gets boring if you don't already care about the world.
Right.
So I think they did a good job. I could definitely envision myself there. So I liked it. They didn't go as detailed on the characters, like what they look like and what they wore, necessarily, as I would prefer. I know why authors do that, because you want your readers to be able to picture that as them. But I'm the oddball who would prefer to know, like, okay, they have a mole on their right cheek and their hair is red and it you know, I like all those details, but I'm
Mhm.
swimming upstream there, and I know that.
Ah,
So before we move on, do you guys have a preference on your end? Do you prefer to have those level of detailed descriptions of characters, or do you like when they leave room for you to envision it?
I think a little more detail would have been better to help envision what they really look like.
Okay.
I think I'm more the other way. I like to leave it up to my own imagination. Of course, then when it comes out on the screen, I'm always going, I never pictured them like that. But I didn't miss those details um, in this book.
Yeah, you know, there's a reason that on the, like, for instance, on the video games, the Halo, for instance, the Master Chief, you don't see his face, and the reason for that is by leaving his helmet on the whole time. The Mando for Mandalorian does it too. By leaving the helmet on the whole time, you could picture that as yourself under that armor.
Right.
Right.
That's the reason that people do that approach, so you can envision yourself. Because if you describe it in such a way that doesn't look like the person reading it,
Mm-hmm.
um, it could, for some people, you know, stop their ability to envision it. But like I said, I just prefer more of the details. So it's interesting to hear the balance between the three of us about what we think there.
True.
Um, so okay, all right. Well, then we will move on and we will talk about the narration. So this is where we look at the audiobook and consider sound quality, voice of the narrator. Did it fit the story? Did you guys listen or read?
I read.
I read also. I'm familiar
Okay.
with Katie's narration, but I did not hear it for this book.
So I actually really think, on the one hand, I hate Katie Cross because she's like a triple threat. She understands the business, and she can do her own narration, and she's an amazing writer. So it's not fair. With that, you know, bitterness out of the way, I think she did a really good job. I mean, sometimes when an author reads their own book, it's very clear they're not the professional. I did not get that impression. Like, I could see her narrating other people's books and not say, "Oh, this is an amateur narration." Like, she does an amazing job. Um, so you know, she's got the skill. She does the accents. She has the post production help to make the final package clean and professional. Fun fact is, most audiobooks are produced at such a level these days that there's no room to get better, because any improvement to the sound quality would be missed by the human ear, because we've already maxed out our ability to process it. And so that's the good news for Katie, is it makes her productions a lot more timeless, because she doesn't have to worry about continually updating. But I
True.
think she nailed it, and she did the accents, and it wasn't. Sometimes it's comical when a male narrator does a female voice or vice versa, and I didn't feel that way with this one. And it is kind of surreal to have the author read the story to you. You can almost picture sitting around a camp circle where they're telling you the story, which I really liked.
Yeah, I like that
So,
too. Because obviously they know what they want it to sound like. So,
Yeah, I've sat
that's
in on Zoom meetings with her where she's doing the recordings of her books and watching the how she does it. And if she has to stop and go back and do something because it's not quite right. But I'm not much on audiobooks because I read too fast and the slowness
okay.
of the reading is hard for me to just go that pace. So
Okay. I listened to, so I used to be just like you. That was my opinion. And then I suffered a head injury when I was in Iraq. So I actually listen because it doesn't put as much strain for
yeah,
me. So it works. I mean, I still read too because, audiobooks aren't free. They could get a little pricey, but yeah, I can see where you're saying where, the preference to listen. And then if you're reading it yourself, you're hearing accents potentially different.
right.
You're putting inflections in different places. Um,
when
I
you're
will say that.
commuting, oh, so sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I was commuting to work, that's when I really got into audiobooks, and I still listen to them on, car trips. Um,
Absolutely. And I actually listen to audiobooks when I'm doing my daily walks, and I've lost a decent amount of weight that because I'm like, well, I'm only gonna do 5,000 steps, and like I hit 7,000. I'm like, well, one more chapter won't kill me. And so you push just a little bit further because you want the story to keep going. So it's a good carrot and stick, I guess, for people that are out there trying to get their step on. I will say I thought Katie was a good narrator. She was a good fit for the story. It makes sense that she would be. She wrote the story with her voice, so her voice literally reading it to you makes
Yeah.
sense. But I did enjoy her production. I thought she nailed it. I'm curious to see if any of the future books we might get Derek to read some of the male dialogue, so that way it's a male voice and female voice. But we'll have to see if we can peer pressure him into it.
There you
So the next part.
I don't know if he'd fit in her sound booth to work with her. So
I haven't watched the videos where she records it. I've just heard the final product, and every time we've interviewed her, she's been in her dining room. So because that's the best lighting, I guess.
yeah.
So I haven't seen her sound booth. Now I'm gonna have to ask for pictures. So the next
I'm
part
not
of the
going to spoil it for you and tell you what it is.
yeah, me either. But
is it a closet? Because I know some people that actually literally record in their closet.
it could be.
Right.
But we're not going to reveal that information.
It's top secret. You have to join her fan club for that information.
Exactly.
So the next part is we're going to look at some major themes, where if there were any overarching themes that you thought were in this novel. So the obvious one I thought was the coming of age story of Astrid. Do you feel like that one kind of fit through the course of the novel for you?
Yeah, I think that was the major one.
Like, so I have trouble with the coming of age trope because a lot of times what they're calling kids in these novels, and I'm like, I was on my second war zone by that age. What are you talking about?
Right.
But I also recognize growing up a military brat, I enlisted at 17. So hearing a 19-year-old referred to as a kid in any fiction is just like, really? They did the coming of age story, I think, Katie and Derek did without weighing it down and making her seem childish at that age.
Right.
Right.
I know why you want them to be 18 or up, because then the world's more forgiving no matter what you do with the characters, right? Because if you have an actual minor doing it, you squick some people out, and understandably so.
Right.
The flip side of that is then when you make them acting like 14, because that's what you really envision them as, it just doesn't match up when you try to write that, when you try to split those hairs. And so I think she did a good job of someone somewhere in the middle of adulthood and leaving the childhood playground, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And you go full circle because you open this novel with her in a train. And if you're reading the sample, it's the first 10% people, no spoilers. But the book opens with her in the training field trying to overcome her emotions as she's fighting someone bigger than her, because she's described as very petite. And then you compare and contrast that to what we see when she returns home at the end of book one.
Right.
And that's, like I said, that's in the description, so no spoilers. I feel like, it worked as someone who's coming into her own, even though she's started as a chronological adult.
Right. I mean, she has so much growth, and yep.
Okay. The other theme that I noticed, and then we'll let you guys, I noticed three myself, but I noticed one of the themes that seemed to fit this story was the concept of life at a crossroads, where you kind of like everyone reaches a point in their life, and we hinted at this earlier with accepting that you might not be good enough at something, where you have to decide, the road only forks left or right, and which way am I going to go, and whatever I choose will affect drastically the rest of the course of my life. Sometimes life sort of forces those decisions on you, and you definitely see that with Astrid. So her choice is, because they, like I said, they talk about it in the blurb, was stay in her kingdom for the chance, or in her tribe for the chance for one more season to see if she can be called and hear the wolf song, or she can go to the Mad King's city and try to prevent a war. And she sort of has to decide what's more important, her personal ambition or the overall well-being of her tribe. And that theme of like sort of life at a crossroad transcends the rest, I think, of the story.
Yeah, I think what I had written down as one of the major themes sort of is the same theme that you're talking about there, or fate. Well, I wrote fate may have a greater things in mind than what you might think.
I like that.
So I just felt like that kind of went with what you were talking about.
Okay. And since there was some religion in this book, in that she talked to a winter spirit that was at some level maybe not quite deified, but definitely in the ballpark of a demigod.
Yeah.
I think you see some of that with accepting the idea that, sometimes the gods or God, whatever you prefer, the answer for your prayer is no. And she has to sort of learn to accept that. Like you said, fate may have other plans for you.
Yeah.
What do you think about that one, Karen?
Yeah, sometimes what you think is your destiny isn't always your destiny, and you have to learn that things change, and you have to accept that change.
So the other one I saw was her having to come to terms with the injustice of the world, because the whole book is about her trying to clear her name for the incident with the Rosalind's guard, which, like I said, in the blurb, no spoilers, people, but the course of clearing her name and preventing a war from escalating, she's constantly dealing with the injustice of the world. And I think that's something, again, that falls under almost the coming of age, because you have to sort of learn to accept the world as it is and not as you wish it to be. Because that's the first step of trying to affect change, is recognizing where you start. So did you guys see any other themes that you thought carried out throughout the novel?
I have that helped me come to you from unexpected places. And, I don't really want to get into that too much, but I don't know. I felt like that. And then just your traditional good versus evil, of course, was present. But yeah.
Yeah, I like what you mentioned, the good versus evil. One of my larger complaints about modern fantasy is, and you see it some in sci-fi too, is this idea of everything is gray, the grim dark, there really is no good or evil, and you end up rooting for the bad guy as much as the good guy. And I think there's room for the moral lessons of good is good and bad is bad, and sometimes you have to pick. I mean, there are certainly times when the world is gray, but there's value in understanding where those lines of morality are. And I think you sort of delve into that a little bit through the incident that brought her to the Mad King's city. I don't want to give any spoilers, but you definitely, and that comes under her coming to grips with the injustice of the world.
Exactly.
So I definitely like that. Did you guys have any other themes, or do you want to move on to our overall thoughts?
Well, the whole pressure to live up to her family expectations, and how you realize that you have to live your life and can't depend on what people expect you to do.
Yeah.
If it's not making you happy because you are doing it because someone else expects you to do it, then you're not doing it for the right reason.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I think that's a good one too. Yeah, that's good. So the next part is where we're going to talk about the overall our overall thoughts on the book. Basically, your opinion on it overall. Would you recommend it to your friends and why? As a general sort of overarching view of the book, like it, love it, hate it.
I loved it. Yeah, we both loved it.
Yeah, I gave it.
I don't like it having to wait so long in between books. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I just reread it and then I go on to this next one. So
Yeah, well, at least Katie and Derek seem to be willing to put the work in. I don't have any fear, at least with them, that they're going to leave me hanging. And unfortunately, if you wait for authors to finish books, sometimes the lack of buying, because people do that, indicate, oh, well, this isn't a good investment. So the authors will never finish it because it didn't get the sales. So it's a double-edged sword that's a result of certain famous authors leaving you hanging for a decade or more on various popular series that you'll never get a conclusion to.
yeah.
And so it's a hard thing to balance. But yes, I definitely liked it. I definitely don't want to wait for more. That's why I tried to peer pressure Katie into stopping all of her other books, but she wouldn't. Meanie.
How much did you offer her, though? I mean, you have to hit the right price point.
I offered her coffee, and she said she could get her own.
Oh, see, that's where I would have given her. So I don't have any ideas.
Chocolate.
And definitely, maybe we should get her own wolf, but then she's got kids, so maybe she doesn't want a wolf around them.
I think her 3 dogs are as close as wolves as she wants right now.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So, Karen, what did you think of the story overall?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the book cover, from the book cover to the blurb. I mean, the book cover would caught my eye, which would made me read the blurb, and then I would buy the book, and got me hooked in the first few chapters. And so I just kept reading, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely.
Good pace. And
what about you, Carrie? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I love the book. It pulled me in. I haven't read. I can't think of books that I've read in the same vein, where there's that possibility of connection between, a person and an animal on that level, as a warrior team. And I enjoyed the world and its different settings, but I just feel like there's going to be so much more coming. There's so much more to look forward to. There's things that are alluded to by the Spirit of Winter that I'm really interested in. I'm interested to see where new relationships between the communities are going to come into play. And also, what else is going to happen with, we'll just say the bad guys and where that's going to end up. But I got to wait.
Yeah, I definitely. Go ahead.
I like that beginning when you're introduced you to this new world and they have the vocabulary at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
To explain the words and what the certain things are, so that I found myself looking back into that and saying, okay, yeah, that's what this was. And if it hadn't been there, you wouldn't have had that flavor.
That's true.
That deeper understanding of what was going on without the knowledge of the vocabulary.
Yeah. So overall, I'm going to try to mix this up a little bit. First off, I will say, if you're, maybe I should have done this in the beginning. If you're deciding to read this book, give you one little bit of a content warning. I think this novel is sort of appropriate for anyone sort of 13 and up, but there weren't really any vulgarities that I noticed, but there was one scene, and you got to understand we're working around the algorithms of YouTube, but there was one scene that hinted at the possibility of a violent romantic encounter where the female protagonist wasn't willing. You can read between the lines there, and so I understand that's a sensitive subject for people. It wasn't gory, and like I said, it stopped before it got to that point. but I do think, if you're going to make an informed decision, I think you should know that. Overall, I thought the pacing was well done. It definitely had sort of the characters that lived in the Wolfmoor, which is the kingdom that Astrid is from. It felt like it was inhabited by sort of just Joe Everyman, which I really like. So I'd give this story 5 stars for sure. It had me hooked. I will say I'm probably not the target audience. I don't generally read YA fantasy, but when we did the interview, Katie convinced me with her pitch that it was worth checking out. I even got my mom to read it because in my comparison in my book review, and I intentionally didn't reread that review before we talked about this because separate thoughts. So I thought it's worth you checking that out too, and it's linked in the show notes. But this basically is the kind of the book. If you like Dragon Riders of Pern, this book is for you because it's basically sort of that story but cooler because wolves beat dragons. So. And Astrid definitely gave me sort of some Xena Warrior Princess vibes, which is like one of my first crushes growing up watching that show, which I like. It's the story of the everyman, an underdog, because you talk about Astrid's petite size, but Katie did it in a way that made sense for anyone who understands anything about martial arts, because when you see a girl who's 5'0" without magic or enhanced armor or whatever to explain away the unbelievable, when those characters suddenly can beat up the 6', 300-pound muscle-bound Hulk who's been training his entire life to be a fighter, and they beat them up easily with no question, it just sort of strains incredulity. I think the way Astrid was described, even when she's fighting bigger people, it made sense. Like, she set it up. She used speed and cunning over brute strength. Like, she outthought them instead of outfought them, which is an important distinction. You could definitely see some of Katie's inside knowledge because her husband was into the martial arts at some level. If you know, you know. And so I think it was very believable, and I was definitely hooked. And I am going to peer pressure her until I get book 2. So, are we there yet, Katie? Are we there yet? Because I know she's going to listen.
She better not hear that you prefer wolves over dragons.
Yeah, that's I want to just support dragons here today.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I always liked wolves. I think my first exposure to wolves in fiction was the Belgarion series by David Eddings, and he turned into a wolf. And ever since then, I've been like, that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. The little boy in me just was hooked. So, and I started reading novels really young.
Our connection with dogs. So,
what's that?
Our connection with dogs then makes us closer to wolves.
I think so. And so I don't know. For me, I like the wolves. I mean, I'm on my 5th copy of Dragon Riders of Pern because I read through it and then the book falls apart eventually. So it's not that I don't like dragons, but if I had to choose, I'm picking the wolf every day.
Okay.
All right. So if you were going to rate this story on a scale of 1 to 5, obviously I'm giving it 5 stars. I sort of let that cat out of the bag. But what about you, Karen? Is it a 5-star for you?
Yeah, it's a 5-star for me. It was a page turner, and like I said, I started reading it and stayed up all night to finish it. So,
yeah,
not a lot of books that I'll do that with.
Fair. What about you, Carrie?
Oh yeah, definitely 5 stars.
All righty. And with that being said, as we bring this home, remember, I will link the book in all of the show notes, my review that was written for Upstream Reviews. I will link to Katie and Derek's contact information if you want to stalk the authors. The guests that we have today aren't authors themselves, so they don't have their own social media presence. But if you ever want to share nerdy book talk with them, they do hang out in the fan club for Katie Cross, the Witchery, I think you called it.
Yeah, the Witchery.
Yeah, so I will link to that as well, and I will link to the fan club for Derek if that's more your speed. So you can or follow both of them, which is what I would do and what I did. So before we wrap this up, what are you guys reading right now?
Starting a new one from another. I can't even think of it right now. My brain is fried.
True. It's 10 o'clock at the time we're recording this.
Yeah.
I'm reading Ink Inkblood Sister Scribe. I'm
Okay.
a little over halfway through it. But I also just had finished Katie's I think it's just being released, Sister Witches book 4. I'm always in a book, so.
So can you guys read more than one book at a time, or are you like a one and done and then the next one kind of
I'm
person?
a one and done.
I prefer
One at a time,
one and
okay.
done, but I can read multiple books at a time.
Okay.
I read over 100 pages an hour, so one and done isn't
Holy
too hard.
garbage. So I can read 2 at a time, but I can't read 2 fiction or 2 nonfiction at a time. So I can read 1 of each at a time. That doesn't bother me because I got used to doing that when I was in college because you had to read the, whatever your textbook was and then whatever you read to escape the textbook.
Yeah.
So right now, just because, we're leading up to Independence Day season because we're recording this in June and airing it in July. So I'm reading John Adams by David McCullough. I hope I pronounced his last name right. And then I'm going to watch the HBO special based on that book. And then I'm also reading Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devin Price. I've made no secret that I have special needs kids, so helping them help themselves, which is the object of that book, seems like a useful skill. So I'm reading that. I recommend both of them.
Oh, yeah, I'll have to look into that, the autism book. I'm glad to hear
Yeah,
that.
I'm enjoying it. It's told, so not everything, because I had sons, not everything is relatable because Devin is a female and she's writing about her experience being autistic and how that's different than how it's for most males that are autistic. Her experience is different enough that I think it's worth looking into. But I do think there's some crossover as well between, just across the gender spectrum, that there's some universality there as well. And she talks about all of it. So I recommend it. I think it's an easy read too. It's not too difficult. It's not too academic. So I definitely recommend that.
What are you saying about me? Are you saying that no, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm talking to the entire audience, and I know some of the people listening to my podcast are our Army veteran infantry types. So, I mean, we're just doing good if they can string Cat in the Hat together.
Yeah, the ones I'm getting into are Dragons of Dragonos by Lady V and Alice Brown.
Okay.
And then the other one is just by the Alice Brown, and it's Vampires Among Us. It's a 3-book series.
Oh.
So you did mention that.
What's that?
I said both of you mentioned that you prefer to read it versus listen to it, but are you guys print ladies or are you ebook?
Print.
Due to some physical issues, it's now easier for me to read an ebook. So I mostly
you can magnify it.
Yeah, it hurts my wrists to work with a book over a long period of time, or even my fingers and hands. So, yeah.
So I will say this, if any of you listening are married, it's easier to hide how many books you've been buying on a Kindle because you can slip it in your pocket than it is your library, which is suddenly overflowing with tons and tons of boxes. So that's one benefit. I will say that if you buy the books, that I recommend you download them because that is an option. So that way, if anything ever happens, you've got your copy of the book. Because the last thing you want is some, e-publisher, and there are lots of them, decide to yank the book for whatever reason, and you're in the middle of it, and then you can't read it anymore. So you paid for it, back it up. That's what I do.
That's a good point.
All right. Well, as we bring this to a close, we'd like to remind you, dear listener, to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. So leave a review on Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, BookBub, any place that you buy it. The author's website gives you an opportunity to leave reviews if you buy it direct, which I highly recommend. The authors make a little bit more of the money that way. And if you are extra motivated, start a website and write a review there, or just go over to Goodreads. But your reviews do help sell the books to the right readers. And sometimes even a bad review will sell a book. So, I mean, not saying to go write bad reviews, but all reviews have value as long as they're well thought out. I mean, obviously the joke among authors is a few of the authors have gotten book reviews of this was not the Jimmy Dean sausage I ordered. But aside from those have value too, because we can just laugh at them.
Yeah.
There's a whole website that does nothing but comical reviews that Amazon has hosted along the years. But yeah, so share your thoughts, people. It does help spread the word. The cult of the book is a valuable commodity. But all right, so we talked about where you could find them. I will link in the show notes. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show. Again, twitter.com/Sierra Foxtrot_fantasy_show. Wow, it's late at night, people. It's been a long day. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, where all the shenanigans happen, at facebook.com/groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, /groups/Blasters and Blades Podcast. You can find us on our website at anchor.fm/Blasters Tech and Tech Blades. Again, anchor.fm/Blasters-and-Blades, where you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. These shows aren't free to reproduce, and your contribution helps. You can support the show more directly at buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts, Doc Cisca and Nick Garber, duly caffeinated. They will drink until they can see sound and hear colors. And that's the good stuff. So, how do you ladies take your coffee? I'm assuming you drink it if you read, because you got to stay up.
Black.
I'm sorry, I'm a tea person. I'm an iced tea person.
Okay. How do you drink your tea? Sweet and iced?
Iced and artificially sweetened, yes.
That works. In the South, they call sweet tea table wine, and we just drink a lot of it.
Oh, it was so good.
Absolutely. And lastly, because we haven't asked this for a while, but we used to ask all of our guests, pineapple on pizza, heresy or capital punishment?
Capital punishment.
You notice I'm biased in the way I phrase that question, but Karen, you're smirking. Do you have other thoughts? Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Yeah. Anything but
Okay.
anchovy.
Anything but anchovies. Okay, I can get behind. Well, I mean, I'll eat anchovies, but they're not my favorite. Well, all right. Dear listener, dear viewer, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And ladies, I appreciate you coming on the show and doing this interview with me.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
It was fun.
It was.
It was. All right. We will have to see if we do more book reviews. We'll give you invites back if you so desire.
All right.
Love it.
Take
All right,
care.
bye.